The first time I started experimenting, bringing in a little bit of a different cultural stuff, I noticed that the people were really engaging. There was almost like a turning up of something.
Something lifted.
Yeah, something lifted. And it had to do, I think, with that whole ability of feeling like, you know what, we are in this together.
Mm-hmm.
And not only are we in this together, but the people in the front are making room for my expression, for something that I connect with.
You're listening to the Ferment Podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's guest is Grimaldi Martinez-Melendez. Grimaldi is a pastor and a bilingual worship leader at the North Jersey Vineyard in South Hackensack, New Jersey. This episode is brought to you by our friends at worshipteam.com. Worship Team comes preloaded with over 12,000 songs, with new songs being added all the time. Hillsong, Bethel, Vineyard, Jesus Culture, Passion, just to name a few. Service building with Worship Team is a snap, and all the songs are completely legal and licensed. Visit them at worshipteam.com today for a free trial. You can also find them on social media: Facebook at worshipteam.com, Twitter at worshipteam, Instagram at worshipteam_WT. Complete worship planning with thousands of songs, easy interface, mobile apps, and legal rights for your church. All you need in one place. worshipteam.com.
Hey everybody, this is Mike O'Brien, director of the Vineyard School of Worship. Our latest single, Be Still, written by my good friend Jason Phillips, is the latest of our monthly singles, available on the first Friday of every month. Jason is the pastor of worship and arts at the Raleigh Vineyard in North Carolina. Check it out wherever you listen to music.
All right, everybody, we are in, and I've got a good friend here with me today on the podcast. I've got a true East Coast friend here. Grimaldi, why don't you say hello?
Hi, everyone.
That's right. Grimaldi, I know you, and you know what? The East Coast knows you, but there's going to be a lot of people listening to the podcast that don't know you and have no clue what's going on with you right now. So why don't you just take a moment and just sort of introduce yourself and let people know who you are, where you're living, what you're doing, that kind of thing.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, Grimaldi Martinez. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. So, New Yorker. Grew up in a very Hispanic neighborhood in Brooklyn. My family is Puerto Rican descent. And so I grew up in between the U.S. and Puerto Rico, going there, visiting during the summers.
So just I have to interject here. This means your grandmama can flat out cook, right?
Oh, dang, straight.
Yeah, come on. Yeah, yeah, come on. Okay.
Yeah. My grandma, actually, she passed, but boy, that woman could cook, and both of my grandmamas could cook, and they passed that on to my mom, and
Amen.
And my wife, who is French Canadian from Maine, learned from my mom how to cook.
How sweet is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so you grew up in Brooklyn, flying back and forth to Puerto Rico with your family, and then what are maybe some of the highlights across the way here?
So probably in that same area till I was about 18.
Yeah.
Didn't grow up in church. Nominal Catholic background, but not a faithful Catholic at all. And about 17 years old, senior year of high school, I went through this internal crisis of what am I doing with my life and what's this life all about? Realized that I needed something other than myself. And if there was something bigger than me out there, it had to be God. And I needed to find out whether he was real or not.
Yeah.
So that was my senior year of high school.
Was it just like senior year pressure?
Absolutely.
Or was there an incident or were there events, or was it just like the generalized like life change thing?
Yeah, it was generalized life change that just, I mean, obviously it triggered an internal crisis
Yeah.
in my own life. And, you know, in retrospect, I look at it and at that point I didn't think, you know, I thought my whole world was falling apart. And in retrospect, I look at it and as a fairly normal occurrence for a lot of kids.
Yeah, it is. It's like it's the first steps towards independence.
Yeah.
Right.
But thankfully, I'm glad it was a crisis for me because it was the thing that brought me to Jesus. It was the thing that made me realize that I couldn't do life by myself. And so that was the start, 17 turning 18. New York City at that time, 18 was the age that you can go into clubs and bars and stuff and not be ID'd. And so that was something I was looking forward to, but I got saved like 2 months before my 18th birthday.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
But hey, it was radical, man.
And how did you get saved? Like what?
Yeah, so
'Cause,
that's
I mean, if your family's Catholic,
right.
and I know where you're at now.
Yeah.
What was that?
So I had an aunt out of my whole family. I had a few aunts that had within the Catholic charismatic movement,
Yeah.
really had an encounter with God. My Aunt Carmen, who also passed away, she was a spiritual mom. She passed away about a year ago. Great woman, incredible. She's responsible for a lot of who I am right now. She had come to Christ and she'd been praying for the family for years, praying for us for years and years. And I was afraid of her. She spooked me out. I wanted nothing to do.
Yeah, she spooked you out. That's hilarious.
Yeah. I wanted nothing to do with her. But the day I knew I needed God, she was the first person I called.
Oh, you called her?
I called her. Yeah.
Oh.
And so out of the blue, it was not a normal thing for me to call her. I call her and we call aunts in Puerto Rico. The tia is the Spanish word, but we call them titi, which is more of an endearing term.
Yeah. Something a little sweeter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I called her up and I said, Titi, it's Grimaldi. And she goes, Grimaldi? You know, she just like freaked out. And I began to tell her what I was going through internally. 3 nights before, she had a dream, and this is the type of woman she was. She was a very prophetic, godly woman. She had a dream, and in this dream, I came up to her bed, and I was crying out, and I was bleeding out of my body, just all over, just bleeding. And I was crying out, and she said, she woke up, and she just started praying for me. And it was 3 days later that I called her up.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Grimaldi, that's one of the best stories I've heard in a while.
Yeah.
And so you gave your life to Jesus, but where did you go to church? Like what was the next? How did you engage your faith?
Yeah. So I gave my heart to Christ. I gave my heart to Jesus, and then 2 weeks later, I was off to Ohio, which is where they lived, for an intense initiation discipleship because I needed to get grounded, and it happened to be during spring break, which was great. It was the timing was awesome. And I was able to go there. I spent all my spring break in Ohio, which, by the way, that church is now a vineyard.
Really?
Yeah, Christ the King Vineyard Church, which is out in I think it's Elyria, Ohio. At that time, they were a charismatic Lutheran church.
Get out of here.
Yeah, but they are a vineyard church now.
Get out of here.
I went there. I spent 2 weeks there, man, and it was like a crash course in discipleship. And when I came back with a mission to find a church that was, Christ-centered, Spirit-filled, and Bible teaching.
Yeah.
And that's what I came back, and I found the church in New York City.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I just love that it was your aunt who led you to Jesus. You know, I love hearing like these family things. Okay, so how long have you been a believer then?
So 1989,
Yeah.
almost 20,
Mhm.
27, 28, 29 years.
Yeah.
Around
Okay,
there.
that's more than a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Grimaldi, like if you're looking over your 29, 30-year history with Jesus, like what are some of the things that that Jesus has done with you over these 30 years? Like what are the big themes maybe of your life?
I would say the big themes for me was one, dependence.
Mm.
Um,
What does that word mean to you?
Dependence. So what it means to me is just really realizing that he was able to take care of my needs, that in every way I could imagine, he was my all in all. He became my sustainer, my everything, emotionally, spiritually, just really depending on him in weakness for things that I wanted to do, but did not feel like I had the capacity within myself to do,
Yeah.
but really felt like I was called to do it.
Yeah. Is there anything you can remember that you wanted to do but didn't feel like you could?
Well, worship was
really?
the beginning of that journey, actually.
Okay.
Now, I grew up playing music. I mean,
Yeah.
I grew up, I think I picked up my first instrument when I was 8 years old.
Okay. Musical family?
Yes, very musical family. I mean, our family was super musical. As a matter of fact, our family get-togethers included music. What we did was we would get together and we would sing traditional Puerto Rican songs.
Yeah.
My uncle would bring his guitar, and other people would have, bongos or maracas or guido.
And then everybody just sings.
And everyone just sang and participated. It was part, of family events.
But worship felt like
worship was different.
Yeah.
Yeah, worship
So
was
it wasn't
different.
about the music.
It wasn't about the music because I was a musician. I could
Yeah.
do the music.
Yeah.
But worship itself was different. And I knew that as a musician, I knew that worship was different, and I just never made that connection. It was weird. I just never made that connection until probably about maybe 6 to 8 months into my relationship with Jesus. We were at my youth group in this church, my last year of youth group there, and the youth group would just sing. We would just start our youth services, and they would just sing. There was one guitar, and everyone would pick a harmony. And it was just incredible. I mean, and I felt something different. And all of a sudden I realized, I'm like, wait a minute, I have a whole heritage of music here. And there's something about this singing, and there's something about the way they're laying their harmonies and the way they're worshiping God with music, that I feel something that I don't feel in any other expression or any other discipline that I've learned so far.
Of music.
Not just of music, but a spiritual discipline.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, my music background connected with this spiritual dynamic that was going on.
Yeah.
And I realized that I connected spiritually in a different way with music and with worship than any other way available to me.
When did you actually start leading worship?
So I get saved. 8 months later, I'm in Bible college.
Yeah, man.
Which I don't recommend.
You were committed, brother.
Brother, I was, man.
You
It was
were all
a
in.
radical. It was a
Yeah.
radical thing,
Yeah.
bro. 8 months later, I'm in Bible college at Valley Forge University, in now called Valley Forge University. It was Valley Forge Christian College at that time, and it was there where I hit my first worship team as a drummer.
All
It's
right.
a long story. I won't get into that,
Yeah.
how I ended up doing that, but as a drummer.
Yeah.
And then from there, after that year, we had our chapels, and it was really a senior privilege to have a worship leader that was a student to do the Friday chapels. That was the big thing. That was like one of the senior privileges. And I don't know how, I don't know why, because I was just a drummer and I was just part of a team. But one of the teachers that was in charge of chapel comes to me during the summer and says, "Hey, Grimaldi," he goes, "I'm taking over the chapels this year, and I really want you to lead the chapel services for Fridays." Now, I wasn't a senior; I was a junior.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's not like, I think he might have seen me bang out something on the guitar for a small group, which is important. That's cool, because you know how a lot of times worship people don't want to do small groups, and that's where I first
That's where you cut your teeth.
That's where I cut my teeth.
That's where you learn.
I learned, bro. That's where I learned how to play guitar and do chord structures from looking at other guitar players in a small group setting that were way better than me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was from there that this professor said, "Hey, I want you to create a team and I want you to lead worship in chapel." And so that's when it started. That was my junior year. I think I was about 20 or 21 years old at that time.
Yeah.
And from then on,
you were a worship leader.
That was it, man. I just kept growing and growing, and I started connecting my musical background to my worship background, and things started making sense. Things, and even internal things like, I didn't grow up like a singer. I grew up a guitar player.
Yeah.
I grew up a trumpet player. I could play any brass instrument with 3 valves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any 3-valve brass instrument.
Any 3-valve.
Grimaldi's your guy.
I could play it. Right now, I could probably just barely knock out something, but that was my thing. That was what I grew up playing, and guitar. Singing was never in the equation until I came to Christ.
Yeah.
And I believe that that's something that God did.
Yeah.
That was a work of grace. That was a work of God to bring that out in me for that time.
And it's been your whole life.
And it's been my whole life.
Could you just talk to me a little bit about like leading worship in a multicultural expression?
Yeah.
America's not getting whiter. America is changing.
Yeah.
We're becoming more and more influenced from the South, and
That's right.
our Latin brothers and our African American brothers and sisters. You're in Jersey. You're right beside New York. What does multicultural worship mean, and what have you learned over the years?
Yeah. To me, theoretically, for a long time, because I was in Maine,
Oh yeah, man, you're in the Maine woods, pretty white.
So theoretically, it was the whole every tongue, every tribe, every nation. Revelations, I think it's chapter 20, before the throne, right? And that was always a vision for me. I think being up in Maine and being in a mostly cultural place actually ignited even more.
Really,
this whole multicultural expression.
Yeah, because part of your history is that you led worship in Maine for many years.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and so when I came back to the metro area, the North Jersey Vineyard, which is where I'm at right now, Phil Chorley, my pastor, awesome dude. Yeah, give a shout out to him. Our church is, and we didn't try. It's just a reflection of our demographic. It is multicultural.
Yeah.
We have Hispanic, African American, East Indian, Asians, white, American. We have everything in that church. And so when I got there, it was like the first time I started experimenting, bringing in a little bit of a different cultural stuff, I noticed that the people were really engaging. Yeah, there was almost like a turning up of something.
Something lifted.
Yeah, something lifted. And it had to do, I think, with that whole ability of feeling like, you know what, we are in this together.
Mm-hmm.
And not only are we in this together, but the people in the front are making room for my expression, for something that I connect with.
And what was your first? How did you begin to give or show a multicultural expression?
So
what was that?
Yeah, so that's good. It started out, first of all, with talking a lot about we are multicultural. And then doing stuff as simple as adding a choir to our repertoire. Taking some, at that time, music out of our expression, some gospel music, and incorporating it, or some Latin style, or taking some songs and giving them a Latin flavor, And actually, when I was in Maine, one of the first things I did as the worship pastor there is buy a whole percussion. I mean, a professional. I think they still have that professional timbales, congas, everything. And even though it was just me playing them for a good long time, it was at least a little expression of multiculturalism.
Yeah.
We're open. We want to make more than just the dominant culture feel comfortable here.
Yeah.
And we're available. So different rhythms, adding a choir, doing some Latin rhythms to our music, adding bilingual chorus singing.
Oh yeah. Listen, I every time I'm in a worship setting where maybe the song is like English and Spanish together, back and forth, it always touches my heart.
Yeah.
And it's obviously Spanish is not my first language. It's not even my second language, but there's something about that room that I feel it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I've noticed that. It's funny because, I don't get, like, I've talked to some other cultural expressions, and they don't necessarily want to hear songs in their language, some of them, not all of them, but Spanish people do. There's something about that for them that's like a big deal for them.
Yeah.
For us as Hispanics, I always said, knowing that a church was open to Hispanics, even if I didn't attend the Spanish service, or, just knowing that was there always made me feel better.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So you have changed rhythms, sing in Spanish, add a choir. What happened to your worship ministry when you did that? I guess what I'm asking now is, did you get more African American players and Hispanic singers?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we are right now, our drummers, we have two Hispanic drummers, 2 African American drummers. The 2 African American drummers come from gospel backgrounds.
Yeah, so they're sick.
So they are.
They're sick.
Dude, this one guy that we have now is just like, in the pocket, just like, I can't even explain it.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah. We have a bass player who is a beast in funk, jazz, Latin. And so, we have Asian people on our team. We have Trinidadians, African Americans, Hispanics, and white people,
Yeah, that's so good.
And we have a horn section. We have a tight horn section.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, a real horn section. Like in the past, I used to have people who wanted to play horns. And they'd get up there and I'd be like, oh my God, this is horrible.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have a real horn section.
Nice.
So,
Nice. So has that changed your church in a way over the years?
Yeah, it's changed. It's funny. It's changed it, because all this, obviously, we always try to reconcile all this with Vineyard values, and that's, part of the conversation is in this whole multicultural push. And I don't think it's a big fear, but I've heard at times people, well, does that still represent our Vineyard values and stuff like that? And I noticed that,
like the Vineyard value of intimacy, for
instance.
Of
intimacy.
Yeah, because on the surface it could seem like a rub, right?
Right.
Because classic Vineyard worship, Vineyard value would be like intimacy, and if you think about some of those recordings from like Touching the Father's Heart, they're kind of like chill.
Yeah.
And Latin horn section is not chill.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you're working that out.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and we work it out because it's important to us.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? It's not like we're saying, we don't care about vineyard values. No, we do care about vineyard values. As a matter of fact, the reason why we're in the vineyard is because of vineyard values.
That's right.
Our thing is just how can we express vineyard values and still be us,
Yeah.
and still but still be part of the whole.
Oh, of course.
You know.
Yeah, I think this is something that the vineyard is like 40 years old now.
Mhm.
And our family, well, it's like it's just like a person who grows up, when you get older, hopefully you're becoming more mature,
Right.
not just older,
Yeah.
but actually wiser. But then also as a family gets older, it usually grows and expands, right? Yeah. And I think the vineyard has grown. I think we're maybe getting a little wiser,
Yeah.
maybe,
Yeah.
and we've certainly grown in terms of numbers and expanded. And honestly, the growth in the vineyard in the last several years has been this explosion of multicultural expression.
Yeah.
And so I think what's happening right now is that the vineyard values are being rediscovered through multicultural lenses, and I just think it's awesome when guys like you and what you guys are doing at the Jersey Vineyard there. I think you're actually adding to the conversation. I don't think it's taking away from it. I think it's like, okay, this is the next
Right.
conversation that we're having.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
that's so cool. And I, from my perspective, I want to say that, that I cut my worship teeth though on the seemingly monocultural stuff that was vineyard for a long time, and not just vineyard, but what was out there in worship in general. So it's not like there's a devaluing of that, because that meant a lot in my own personal journey.
Yeah.
Guys like David Ruiz and
yeah,
I remember the first time I heard David Ruiz, I was like, what is this? Who is this? Because
I still feel that way.
right, but
yeah.
it made so much sense to me internally. Musically, it made sense to me. Spiritually, it made sense to me. And then from then on, the Andy Parks and all these guys,
Yeah.
But what I see now is that, they've given so much in that sense. And I feel like at this point, it's like, well, you know what? We have something to give too that can be meaningful.
Yeah.
And, thank you for the opportunity, in a sense, is, for opening that up, because what ends up happening is that if the majority culture doesn't allow that, then, we end up having what we have, monocultural expressions like gospel music, which is great.
Yep.
Or, people who go straight down the Latino route, and
Yep.
that's the only avenue that they have.
Yeah.
But that doesn't create multiculturalism,
Yeah.
And so there is definitely an appreciation for the heritage and the principles that are there. And I love the fact you mentioned the fact that the vineyard is trying to do this. And I remember one time someone saying, we may be fumbling at it right now, or bumbling at it,
Yeah.
but we're trying to do it.
No, that's it, right?
And it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. These kinds of conversations are always so complicated, and it takes time. But I'm just happy that they're happening, because Grimaldi, I'm an outside, I'm an insider, but also an outsider in some ways, because I live in a very monoculture. It's Kentucky. It's, it's pretty lily white where I live. But as someone who just sees what you guys are doing, and then other places in the vineyard, I'm becoming more aware that, like, this is the future, and I think, I could be really wrong here, but just to sort of like piggyback off of something you said a moment ago, I think the future is like actual interaction between all the nationalities and all the people, and it's not just segregated silos. I think that, which makes me so happy, and I'm glad that maybe we're beginning to push into it a little bit. Yeah.
Well, could I say something from just a pure
Yeah.
musical historian sense? A lot of people don't realize, but a lot of white music is very, we
Well, it's
know
rock
that,
and roll, right?
It's rock and roll, and it's very much influenced by the blues.
Rock and roll is it's just the blues that came from the deep South, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that America has always had a influence of what was considered multicultural at that time. We just never recognized it because of all the crap, historically.
Yeah.
I think now, I love part of redemption and part of being the body of Christ is not just that it's there underneath, but that we get to recognize it, at a surface level and say, hey, this is good. This is a real expression.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen. Our music history in America has been, in a sense, the sin of it has been that the people who were the roots of it didn't get much credit for it.
Yeah, they got zero credit,
right?
Many times. Yeah.
But the redemption of what we're doing now is that all of this rises to the top and it all becomes ours.
Yeah. That's an incredibly generous perspective. I like that. I resonate with it though.
Yeah.
Grimaldi, what would you say to like a worship pastor, either in the vineyard or outside the vineyard? Because there's going to be people who listen to this podcast who they're not a part of our tribe, but they're listening. What would you say to somebody who feels this, even realizes, oh my gosh, there are many kinds of people in my community. Like, how do you start? What do you do?
Yeah. I think one of the things is don't be afraid to get help. Don't be afraid to ask people who are doing it already. Connect with them, pick their brains. Steal it. Steal their stuff.
That's right.
Some people are doing it already. They're doing it and they've done it really well for a long time, and I don't think there's a patent on ideas, and people could ask other people for help. I think that's the first step. Be humble, and what you can do and do it well. What you can't do, see if you could find a resource for it. See if someone else could help you do it. See if someone in the congregation or someone from the outside can help you do that. One thing too that I've noticed is that when God puts something strong like that on your heart, he usually brings a person or two.
Yeah.
I've noticed that. Like, there have been times when I'm like, God, I really want this type of, I really need like a drummer that can play this way. And I'll pray and pray, and it's something that's on my heart. And all of a sudden someone walks in, hey, I'm looking at this church. Whoa, are you a drummer? Or, yeah, I'm a drummer. Blah.
That's right.
So there is that aspect of it too. I feel like if it's on your heart, and if God puts that there, then God is going to provide the resources.
That's a great word.
Yeah.
It's certainly not the devil putting that in people's hearts.
No,
right?
Definitely not. Right?
Yeah. So we just have to trust that if it's God, that he is.
Yeah.
He's at work in more than just our own desires, but he's working the world around us.
Right. And ask, don't be afraid to ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know you guys are doing it, so people should totally call you.
I would love to help.
Yeah. You guys are doing it. I know Gino's doing it. I know Tina's doing it.
Yeah.
There's all these people, and Joshua out in California, and they're doing a new thing. So I'm just deeply encouraged by it. Yeah. Hey, I'd like to maybe like shift the conversation just for a second here. Just because of something that happened last night.
All right.
Just for those of you who don't know, Grimaldi and I, we're at like a worship leaders retreat thing right now, and Grimaldi led worship last night with two of his children.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it really, I don't know, it was kind of special. You were with your son, Sam?
Yeah. Sam.
And your daughter,
Isabel.
And Sam is 17, is that right?
Sam is 17.
Isabel's
15.
15.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very cool. It was sort of like, and it wasn't, for me, it wasn't just the sentimentalism of like family band. It was something more than that, And it was it was just awesome to see young people with a couple of the older guys, and by older guys, I mean you and Casey,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And that was just super rad. And then like right in the middle, there's Josh,
Yeah.
like in terms of generation wise.
Yep.
And so we had like 3 generations of worshipers,
Yeah.
multicultural,
Yeah.
leading this very diverse room. And I just want to say it really blessed me,
Awesome.
Yeah. How did you get your kids to just like come along with you for the worship ride?
I wish I could say that there was something purposeful that I remember doing.
Yeah.
If there was, what was purposeful was that we let them be part of everything that we did. My wife and I, in our journey, our kids have been on that journey with us. Our kids are church rats.
Yeah.
We say that lovingly. My kids are church rats. They were there. My oldest was there during the renewal when people were laid out on
Love it.
And he was the kid jumping over bodies.
That's right.
Walking over bodies, and then Sam and Isabel were there for the multiple worship nights and the multiple practices, and Christina's, that's all she's ever known. My baby who's 10 years old. We've involved our kids without having an expectation of certain behavior out of them. We've never put them in a situation where they had to be something because they were pastors' kids, or we just let them be, but we involved them, and we super honest. When we had blowouts in the house, and when we had to ask each other to forgive us, forgiveness, and I'll go to them and I said, look, I shouldn't have said that to your mom. I blew it.
Yeah.
Just being honest with them.
Yeah. There's something about, I think for kids who grow up in ministry, there's something about seeing mom or dad be the same person at home and at church, right? And that's what I'm hearing in what you're saying.
That's right. They knew we weren't perfect. They know it.
Yeah.
and you could
They know it more than anyone, right?
But they know we weren't trying to make errors either.
Yeah.
So I think that made a big difference. And so they were part of everything. And I think they grew up seeing that they could be part of this kingdom experience and not try to be something that they're not. That's one thing. And then I think that just the whole musical aspect was just every one of them, from my oldest, who does not care to be in front of any crowd, to my 10-year-old, are musically gifted.
Yeah. It's just in your heritage, right?
It is very much so.
Deep.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty deep. Yeah.
You have brothers and sisters who play as well?
I have a brother who's a half brother, but we don't talk that way. He's my brother.
Yeah.
And my brother plays keyboards. And my brother was actually, when we were younger, he's actually 13 years young. When he was in his 20s and I was in my 30s, my brother and actually another guy that's here today, Justin Mott, who's here part of the, and some of the other youth, I was their youth pastor. And we started a band.
Yeah.
And I was the 30-something-year-old with a backup band of 20-something-year-olds.
That's it. Yeah. Got some pickups.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a part of your own heritage. It's deeply a part of your family.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so great that it's becoming a part of your own kids, though.
Yeah. And they and all that to say that just from influence, what you see in them is them. They've pursued it, YouTube, hours trying to do fingering, hours trying to do, 6-stroke drum rolls and stuff, stuff that I never taught them.
Yep.
That's them.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, ultimately, a person has to have the hunger inside.
Absolutely.
That's it. Well, I just wanted to tell you, I was blessed by it, and I think it means something for our movement. I even said that last night, but I think, these are the first signs of worship going to another generation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just very aware that because they were your kids, I felt like this was a word from God that this has to do with family.
Yeah.
And not just your family, but like the Vineyard family.
Yeah.
The family of God,
Yeah. Well, your kid, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, your kid, my son is hard to impress as far as drumming is concerned. And River, your kid, was doing one of the sessions, and I, I think my son really connected with him.
Yeah, they've been hanging.
Yeah, so I'm pretty stoked about that.
Yeah, something's happening in our movement.
Yeah,
you know, not just I guess what I'm noticing is something is happening in our movement, and it's happening in different groups of people, different nationalities, but something's also happening in a new generation.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you one more question.
Yep.
And this is the question I'm sort of like asking everyone. And I would love for you to tell me a time when you experienced like overwhelming joy.
Gosh, that's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question, huh?
Because there's so many different things. I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
I think I would say the birth of our first kid.
What was it about the birth of your first kid?
First of all, I couldn't believe that that my wife and I did this. You know what I'm saying? That we're like, first of all, we were young. I was 20. I was 24. I think I was 23, 24, and I still felt like a kid inside.
Yeah.
And they're letting us take this kid home.
Yeah, and you can't take it back.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, just the thought of that is part of us. There was something about, and my first kid, and it's funny because he is, out of all my kids, he is the most like non-touchy-feely. He doesn't he's not a hugger or anything like that. But there's something about my first kid that I still feel like he's my baby, But it's that first connection, man.
Well, what's interesting is I've asked this question to a bunch of people who've been on the podcast now. Children being born is like, it comes up really often. Yeah. It's important, isn't it? It's new life.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
That's so good. Well, Grimaldi, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
I think you've shared some great wisdom here. And for everybody who's listening, if you are in a multicultural context, or if you're wanting to grow it and you literally have no idea what to do, Grimaldi is a trusted guide. All right, guys, high fives.
Hey everybody, this is Casey Corum, the producer of the Ferment Podcast. Thanks for listening. If you've been enjoying the podcast, I've got a couple ways you could really help us. First of all, review the podcast on iTunes or the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media, on Instagram at the Ferment Podcast and on Twitter at FermentCast. All right, people, see you next time.